Do you find that you're spending a lot of your days dealing with anxiety? There's a lot going on in the world right now, from questions of the climate, crazy politics, just the everyday life under the pandemic, and dealing with, frankly, other people who are also very anxious, and it's a contagious thing. So we're running into, on a good day, other people who are not very well regulated. And so in this video, what I'd like to do for you is show you 3 ways that anxiety shows up in the body. Because we know those life circumstances, we know what they are that are stressing us out. But when it comes to how we act, how we feel, that's all in the body. And if we don't recognize what Moshe Feldenkrais called the body pattern of anxiety, then we're trapped by it. And we're relating to other people from anxiety. We're making decisions from anxiety. We're trapped in this very tight, uncomfortable space. So let's look at 3 different ways that anxiety shows up in the body. Whatever was the thing that made you anxious in the first place, these are things that likely occur for you when you are anxious. What we want to do is learn how to recognize them, and then I'm going to introduce some simple practices that we can use to counteract those anxiety patterns, both in the moment and things that we can just be doing as a regular practice to help us build a different kind of habit. Now, before we go any further, I'd like to acknowledge that what we're talking about today in terms of recognizing these patterns and working through them, it is easier said than done. So if you'd like some targeted support, there is a link below where you can book a free call with me, and I'd be happy to tell you about how I can support you. Okay, so what do we do when we're anxious? There are 3 things that we typically do. We typically hold our breath, right? We freeze, and when I say freeze, I mean literally freeze. We go motionless, right? We just stop moving. And then a particular way is that we tend to tighten in the belly, okay? And as I said, these things happen often all together, but let's look at them one at a time. The first pattern we're going to talk about is the habit of holding your breath. Something startles you, or someone says something that feels triggering to you, or there's just that kind of creeping anxiety going on when you're uncomfortable in a situation, and maybe you realize that you've stopped breathing. Now, the problem is we often don't realize that, and we'll hold the breath for quite a while. You might hold your breath for 10 or 15 seconds and then suddenly realize, or maybe you just take another breath and don't particularly notice what just happened. So the best thing we can say here is we just want to be more connected to the breath in general. Now, people talk about being in their heads, right? And that's often what happens with anxiety. There's that voice, and where attention is in the head with that voice, is usually saying something not so kind to us, and we're disconnected from the surrounding world. We're disconnected to our body. So the first simple practice that you can begin to do several times throughout the day is simply to pause. Pause, notice the breathing. This doesn't mean doing some deep breathing or some special technique, but just noticing that it's coming and going. Feeling your connection to the supporting surfaces if you're sitting underneath you or your feet on the ground. And just having that connection is going to put you more in your body. And then you can take some time to notice the space around you. Again, locating yourself in the environment is going to make you feel more connected. And that should help you take a nice breath. If this is something that you make a regular practice of, then it's more likely that you're going to notice those moments where the breath stops. And then that also can be your cue, not only to breathe again, but to feel your connection to your body and to your surroundings. Now, one other simple thing that you can do from time to time, and this is good if you're already feeling anxious, but just to give you a sense that breathing can be simple, breathing can be easy and flowing. And it's to exhale and wait. So rather than trying to take in deep breaths, which sometimes actually raises the activation of the nervous system, what you can do is breathe out, breathe all the air out, and then don't actively take another breath in, but just wait there, just pause until you notice that the pressure between the outside air and inside your chest, it creates a disequilibrium, and you just let the air rush in. So try that now, just a few times in a row. Breathe all the way out, and then pause without trying to hold the breath like you're going to hold it a long time, but just enough so that you feel a little bit like you need the air, and then just stop resisting. The air comes in, and then do that again 2 or 3 times. Now, of course, there are plenty of breathing techniques out there. Another simple one that I'll just mention is box breathing. And this just means to breathe in and breathe out with a pause between both the inhale and the exhale, and to do that on a regular, even pulse. So, for example, breathe in, 2, 3, 4, and stop. 2, 3, 4, and breathe out. 2, 3, 4, and pause. 2, 3, 4. And repeat that. Now, those pauses, when you hold the breath at the end of the exhale or at the end of the inhale, try to make those pauses like, when you're driving and you see the red light and you ease the brakes, and then you come to a stop, and then when the light turns green, you slowly go back into motion. So not sudden, but you're controlling the breath. It's not bad to hold your breath sometimes. If you're going to dive underwater, that's what you're going to do, right? But to begin to notice and control it, that can build a nice habit and just get you more connected to your breath. Beyond this, I have another video about 5 different particular ways to develop breath awareness. And so if you like, you can check that video out as well. Another thing that we do often when we get anxious is we freeze. We literally freeze our movement and just sort of hold as if we were a statue. And that goes right together with holding the breath. So as I said before, they are usually going on together. But this too is something that, if you notice, of course, let yourself move again. But it's a habit, right? And it's actually a habit that's kind of bred into us. You remember back in school, or maybe just growing up, sit still, right? Most of us have been taught that there's something polite or something good about just not moving. And that's pretty unfortunate, because we need to move at every moment just to be upright. Even if you're fairly comfortable, you're going to want to allow a little bit of movement. It takes more work to freeze yourself. And this is especially true when you're standing. You're always going to have what they call it is postural sway, a little bit of movement here and there. And I want to underline this one because it especially happens when we're in a social situation. So someone's speaking to you, maybe you're not in school anymore, but you want to give them the sense that you're listening. And so often what we do is we just sit there and we kind of listen. Or maybe as I'm doing here, I'm kind of nodding my head to show you, yeah, I hear you, but there's this stiffening through my chest, right? So a simple practice, again, is just to enjoy a little bit of a kind of a pendulum movement. Could be left and right, could be forward and back, right? Or it could just be kind of ambling in any direction. And I'm doing enough that you can see, but you can do it very small, but just the sense that you don't have to fix to one particular position. So maybe someone's talking to you and you're just going a little side to side and, okay, yeah, I heard you, right? I'm nodding, I'm listening, then I speak, but all the while I'm just like I was listening to a piece of music that had a nice slow tempo, or I had my feet in the water at the beach, something like that. There's just this little rhythm that I allowed to be in the background. Or imagine sitting in a rocking chair would be another example. But even without a rocking chair, you can just move over your base of support. And this is another way to stay connected to that feeling of your support and stay connected to your body, which we were talking about before. Now, you can also combine this kind of swaying movement with some of the breath work that we were already talking about. So one thing is to just allow this movement as you do that box breath, breathing in and pausing, but when you pause, the movement continues, right? And then exhaling and pausing again. And once again, we try to make those pauses very simple and gentle. Or we can apply that same idea of like allowing the breath to move and then pausing it and allowing it to move. We can do that with the body, but can we do it so that the breath doesn't stop? So maybe I'm swaying and then I'm going to stop swaying for a moment, and I just find a position where I can hang out here for a moment, and then I move again to another position, and then I pause. But all the while, the breath is flowing. So often, like if you take a yoga class, for example, you might go into a pose, and as you go into that position, you do it with the breath, and it's timed with the breath. But it's also really nice to feel that the breath and the movement can be a little bit independent of each other, because that also provides more of a sense of spaciousness in the body and just in the flow of whatever we're doing. Now, just to underline what I said before about how deep these habits can go, I was teaching this idea recently in a workshop, and there was a young woman there who was very active and fit and healthy, but she said that, yeah, I do this, I sit still, and especially when someone's talking to me. And so we actually worked through a process, and we explored this movement, and people were talking, and I noticed that she was looking like she was feeling a little more loose and comfortable. And so then I asked her, what's your experience now? Because we've just tried this out. And she froze again. The great thing though was she recognized it. She said, wow, when you brought the attention to me, I did it, right? So this runs deep, but this is a great way to work through it. And just one more example of that, if you have anxiety, maybe you have begun a practice of meditation, which is a great thing to do. But even though on the surface it looks like when we're meditating we are quote unquote sitting still, again, there's always that little movement. So I have a video making this whole connection to the practice of meditation. If you'd like to check that out, just look right here. The last pattern I want to talk with you about is this habit of sucking in the belly. Now again, that typically comes together with holding the breath and freezing. So I'm doing something and then suddenly, right? I stopped moving, I stopped breathing, and the belly went in. And so again, if we can notice this, then we try to let it go, but again, much easier said than done. And the fact is, again, partly because of cultural ideas about whether we should have a belly or not, and also because so many of us sit with a kind of a slumped posture, many of us are holding this belly in the whole time. So one thing, again, is just to begin with this idea of belly breathing, right? You can remember that exhale and wait, and then as the exhale comes, can you think of breathing not even to your belly button, but even lower down, as if you were going to breathe down into the bowl of your pelvis. And that's not going to be possible if you are sucking the belly in. Now, sucking the belly in goes with restricting the breath. Why? Because when you breathe in, your diaphragm at the bottom of your rib cage needs to descend. But that's going to push the different organs and viscera in your abdomen forward. But if you're holding your belly like this, that can't happen, and the diaphragm can't as easily move. So allowing the belly to come forward. But also, as I mentioned, if I'm sitting slumped, you can see I'm rounded and it moves me backwards. Well, what is the belly doing when we're sucking in? It's moving in this direction. They go together. So if you find a fairly upright posture and you can let your belly be open, but then you suddenly, you suck your belly in, maybe you saw I moved backwards, right? So I went into more depth in another video also related to meditation practice, but a simple thing to do is just rocking the pelvis forward and back. And noticing that when you come forward, that's your opportunity to let the belly go. Let it drop. Don't worry about what it looks like. If you don't want to have constant worry about everything, then you don't want to have that pattern of anxiety always dialed in, right? Rolling over the surface, feeling your sit bones. It's important to do this if you can on a firm surface where you can really feel that skeletal connection. And it's helpful to think of the pubic bone in front, reaching down and back, reaching down between the thighs, because what some people will do is they will put a lot of emphasis on the arching of the back, and that can lead to discomfort. So instead, letting go down below. And one more way that you can make a connection to things we've been doing is just to test this. What's it like to do that pendulum idea and really have your belly open, right? And then just for a moment, so that you can really feel the difference, do suck the belly in. It doesn't have to be much, but even a little, and hold it in and try to do the pendulum. And you can hear in my voice that my voice is a little cut off here too, right? So then, oh, okay, yeah, that's much easier now that I'm allowing myself to have a little bit of a belly. And in fact, it feels like more space around my hip joints. It feels like more space in the area of my low back. So you can think of it as creating space for movement. It allows me to flow in my movement. It allows the diaphragm to descend so that I can breathe freely. Okay, so now you have 3 simple things that you can remember and begin to use to build your awareness so that you can combat the pattern of anxiety in the flow of everyday life. Might be really nice to think of these as things that you allow. You allow yourself to breathe. You allow yourself to move. You allow yourself to have a little bit of a belly. If, like me, you do have a little belly and it's something that you worry about when you're around other people, start at home. Just let it all hang out when no one else is around. At least give yourself the experience of what it's like to not be restricted by that constant contraction in the abdomen. Aside from this, if you can, try to get regular sleep, try to get outside, connection with a friend who can listen to what's going on with you, not someone who needs to give you advice, but just be present with you, and I'm sure they'd love it if you did the same for them. These are things that can really help. And when you're talking, hey, let yourself breathe, let yourself move, let yourself have a little space in your belly. I hope this helped you, and once again, if you'd like my direct support, I'd love to do that with you. Just look at the link below and let's connect. So I'll be making more videos on related topics soon, and if you enjoyed this, consider subscribing to the channel, hit the like button so that more people will end up seeing the video. Leave a comment or question if you have it below, and I'll see you next time. Take care.